When it comes to disinformation, we definitely see that the amount of disinformation fed into the region is not decreasing. It actually is very, very active, and we see the prevalence of this disinformation in some countries more, in some countries less. There are some countries in the region which are really resilient. They are really doing a good job, such as Poland, Czech Republic. And then there are countries, based on our research, that are more vulnerable to Russian disinformation. Well, there are a lot of Russian narratives that are coming through. Basically, they are taken over by local actors. And it's about like who is responsible for the war. At the beginning of the war, there were these disinformation narratives that were completely debunked about biolabs in Ukraine, for example. Also, it was interesting that when the invasion started, already the receivers of disinformation were aware of the fact that there are Nazis in Ukraine, that this is a reason why it has to be helped. So a lot of disinformation about, at the beginning, why this invasion is happening. And this perceives, and then the narratives are changing based on how Russian government is changing them. I think that, so directly we did a research in 2 countries, and that's Romania and Bulgaria. And the rest of the countries, we don't have the current data now. What we see from our previous research is that due to the media landscape, the receivers and information are in much more vulnerable situation, because there are a lot of Russian channels still who are freely pumping this disinformation into the media landscape. This is not the case in EU anymore because of the sanctions, and Russian and Sputnik were taken down. Although, of course, whoever wants to access these channels can do so over the internet, or there are ways how to find access to them, but their activity is slowed down by the fact that they were sanctioned. So I think that the situation is much more complicated in Balkan due to the fact that the Russian media can operate here really successfully. And when it comes to Romania and Bulgaria, it's interesting to see that the situation is worse in Bulgaria based on our data. Basically, the fact that there is a much higher buyout to disinformation narratives says that the country itself is much less resilient to the disinformation, which is more, as we discussed today, the event due to the combination of factors such as education and the fact that Russia is still perceived as a savior throughout the history, and this is how children are taught, but also due to the media landscape and the ownership, etc. For example, Romania, the neighbor, due to the historical events that they faced and experienced, they are much more resilient, and the citizens know where they stand much more, that the orientation is to the West is the right one, and so on. I think there are a lot of very, very valuable initiatives that recently, I think that for a long time already, this is taken as a really serious issue, like information operations from Russia. However, we have to say that Russia has it in its core, this submersive messaging. It was during the Soviet Union, it was later on. I think that we joined and started to counterfight much later, but I think that European Union is fighting and European institutions are fighting on various fronts. So, for example, the DSA is coming into force this year, which is basically the act that will give power to find social networks for helping to spread disinformation and hate speech. Of course, like Facebook is not responsible for Russian disinformation, but is responsible for amplifying it. So the reason why European institutions are taking this stand is because of the protection of freedom of speech itself. Unfortunately, when you are fighting an enemy which doesn't adhere to human rights and freedoms, it's much more complicated. It's much easier for regimes such as Russia and China to spread disinformation because they don't have any human rights standards. Or you can argue with me, but I would say that just look at how many journalists or how many people are in prison for their opinions. So if you want to respect freedom of opinion and freedom of speech, then you have to be really careful how you are going to curb them, because you don't want to go that way. You don't want to limit it too much, so at the end we will be the same as the enemy. So there are new tools in the European Union which helps to, on one hand, limit info ops coming from Russia and disinformation coming from Russia, but it's not equal playing field. So it's very challenging because of that.